Hello, we're the Board Buds, and today we're going to be talking about the #1 ranked game on Board Game Geek for the past few years, Brass Birmingham. We decided to do this review today because the crowdfunding campaign for the new version, Brass Pittsburgh, is underway. So we decided to talk about this. In Brass Birmingham, you're going to be expanding your industrial empire by playing cards to build various buildings, which will produce goods and resources for you, as well as expanding your network of canals and rails to sell goods at the market and have access to new resources and goods. And you do all this to get points and money. Yeah, that's the basic gist of the game. Where do you want to start with the review?
Yes, I think first thing we can talk about is probably one of the more unique things about the game, which is the card action system. Everybody will have 8 cards in hand, and then every turn you'll be able to play 2 cards in order to take 2 actions. And those cards that you have will determine what types of buildings that you can build or where you can build them. So throughout the game, you'll be managing your hand and trying to use that to the best of your ability to build out your network without kind of getting stuck or running over other people. So what do you think about that?
I think the card system is really fun. I like that it gives you kind of a place to start in the early game, since you can't just go wherever you want or anything. I think that helps with the early game AP that can happen if you have too many options to start with.
Yeah.
So it helps with that, and I enjoy that. It can feel kind of bad if you don't get what you want after your initial stuff, but one of the actions allows you to discard any one of your cards to get 2 wilds, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, alleviates most of the problem with the randomness of the card draw there.
Yeah, and there is definitely a little bit of leeway. Usually you don't need a very specific area, just kind of in the general region of where you want to do. And some of like the industry cards will let you build anywhere as long as it's in your network. So there are options to kind of mitigate some of that, but a lot of it is actually more managing what you think other people are going to do, and your risk there of if I have a brewery and I want to build it somewhere, but I think someone else might. Do I save that card to build somewhere else and use a specific location there? So there's a lot of kind of balancing there, mitigating your risk and trying to figure out what other people want to do.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about this game in general is it's really interactive for a Euro game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what everyone else does matters and can very easily mess up what you want to do, and you can sabotage them if you try. It's really interactive game in that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of limited space on each location. So and selling things can also be somewhat limited. You need various resources like iron, coal, and beer in order to perform some actions. And depending on if that's available on the board, it can really hinder what you're doing. But it can also help if people are in need of iron. Building an ironworks, they'll be forced to kind of take your stuff and give you a boost in order to help themselves out.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I found is the more we play with the breweries, some of them allow you to put out either 1 or 2 beers when you make them, and that will become available for everyone. And when we first started, we just always put 2 beer out because that just seemed like the thing to do. But as we've played more, we definitely just make 1 a lot of times, so we don't make it available for someone else, because there's not really a benefit for someone. Allowing someone to use a beer that you've created doesn't really help you for the most part.
Yeah. There's also a lot of interesting systems there with how you're able to gain other people's resources. So certain ones that you can kind of gain anywhere from the map, whereas like coal, you have to be connected to a coal resource or connected to a coal market in order to buy coal. So there's a little bit of making sure that you're with other people, but not necessarily with other people if you want to keep your stuff to yourself. So you're kind of balancing if you want to mutually help each other, or keep it all to yourself?
Another point about that balance of being with people or not is how the points for connections work. So each city has a number of connection points, entry points for either a railway or a canal, which it's split into two areas. There's never going to be both. But you get points based on each connection you have to that, direct connection you have to that city and the industry tiles built there. So if you and someone else are both in a specific city building up the industry there, each connection on that can definitely be worth more, but then you're also competing. So like, do you want to be with people or do you want to try to go off by yourself and be left alone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the more we play, the more those rail points really seem to take effect. You can really, if you see somebody building up an area, just get in there and just try and put down some rails just so you can benefit for getting points just from them building that up. Mm-hmm. And it does kind of connect them to your network, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think, throughout our plays, the swings of the rail points at the end of the game, when you kind of tally those all up, have been pretty big.
Yeah,
it's huge. Not something that you can just ignore.
Definitely some early plays of it. We would let one person kind of dominate Birmingham itself, which is the city with the most connections and slots for industries. And if you just let someone fill that up and take all the connections into it, they're pretty much going to win, I feel.
Yeah.
So that's something we've learned and don't really let happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything that you didn't like about the game?
I think the two main resources to do things outside of money are coal and iron, and they both work slightly differently, which is okay, but it's kind of finicky and can be a little hard to remember sometimes.
Yeah, it is a little kind of cumbersome, especially when going over the rules to explain the difference between how iron works, how coal works, and then you have beer as well, which is more of a minor resource, but it also kind of works similar to both in ways, but slightly different, depending if it's yours or somebody else's. Yeah. So I think, especially if you are a first-time player, that could probably trip people up quite a bit. Just kind of remembering how that works. Also with some of the terminology of what's in your network versus what you're just connected to. I think that can confuse you unless you're pretty familiar with a couple plays.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one of the pain points. I wouldn't really say it's necessarily a huge downside, but just something to kind of keep in mind and make sure everybody understands before you start playing.
Yeah, it's not a huge negative for me, but it's an annoying point for going over the rules and everything and trying to keep it remembered. There's also a reference card that helps everyone. I think there's enough for everybody to have their own, and it explains it well enough, I think, that if you look at it, it should be fine, but it's something that you can get wrong when you're trying to make a plan and then go to execute it, and someone points out, oh, that doesn't really work that way. And slight annoyance, but not a huge thing.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I didn't super like, but wasn't a huge downside, with the cards that you play, it only really matters when you're building actual industry buildings. Every other action that you take, you have to discard a card. It doesn't matter what card you're really discarding. So it's more just getting rid of the cards that you don't need for your buildings. Which it's, like I said, not a huge downside, but I thought it might be more interesting if they made that matter more for the other actions versus kind of just building.
You mean for building your rails and stuff as well?
Mm-hmm. Because just, going back to explaining the rules, you're kind of just well, what your card is matters if you're building, but then, the 6 other actions that you can take, it doesn't matter at all. Outside of, do you want to keep this card in order to build later?
I think the decision on what card to discard can be interesting, but usually it's not. Usually I'll have a city on the opposite side of the board that I just don't care about, so it's a mindless, I'm just throwing this away to build rails or
Yeah,
whatever.
early on, it's just kind of getting rid of the ones that you don't need at all.
Right.
And then, maybe eventually you'll kind of be weighing between which ones you want to keep, for the risk factor. But it was just kind of a little weird thing about it. I thought it would be more involved in the other actions.
One thing I forgot to talk about that I think is pretty interesting and a good decision point in the game is whoever spends, or the amount of money you spend each round determines the turn order for the next round. And I think that's a pretty fun mechanic, although it's kind of annoying to track it.
It is, but I will say it's definitely something that has mattered a ton. And, when playing, it is a decision of like, do I want to do this now, knowing that I'll be on a later turn, or can I do something really cheap this turn? And then that way I can set myself up to be first, take the 2 actions immediately, and get a better combo that way. So it's definitely pretty interesting. But like you said, counting the money sometimes can be kind of annoying, especially, late in the game, you'll have stacks of like, 30 some, and somebody might have 31, somebody might have 32, and then you're...
It's also annoying when like, if you need to make change, you can't just throw your money into the bank and take the change because you need to track it. So that's all a good thing. I like that mechanic quite a bit, but it comes with a minor annoyance, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else you want to touch on before we get into scores?
We could talk a little bit about money. So, during the game, you'll have an income. I believe everybody starts at 0. And that's something that you'll make at the end of every round. You'll get X amount of dollars. But one of the things that you can do is take a loan to get yourself, an immediate $30, but lower your income down. So you'll actually, early in the game, be losing money every round when you take a loan. But, in our experience, I think everybody will take at least 1 loan, if not 2 or 3, just because money is so tight early game. And it's really hard to kind of, at the beginning, get your industry set up to get your income up. So taking loans is something that definitely happens, and I think that's a pretty interesting mechanic, being able to kind of lower your income. Especially, I believe, the amount of steps that you'll go down, it's not necessarily equal in length. So depending on what your income is, you might lose more. That's harder to get back if you take a loan later in the game. Yeah,
early on, each bump to your income is like 1 step, but later in the game it becomes 3, maybe even 4 if you get high enough. So a late loan is going to set you back a lot more as far as getting back to where you were than an early one. I think early loans are definitely a good idea, but it can feel, some people don't like taking loans because it kind of feels bad to take loans. Especially early game when it sets you to the negative and then you got to pay some of that money that you just got from the loan back every turn until you get that fixed. But I like the loan and think it's a good mechanic to have in there.
Yeah, and around that, it's also kind of an interesting decision of if you're going to focus on money buildings early to mitigate that and not have to take loans later, or if you just want to go straight points and just start taking points. Or taking loans just to make up for that money. But most buildings will give you a little bit of both, but you can kind of focus more on one or the other if you'd like. So that's kind of a different ways of play where, I think our last game I only took 1 loan, but, someone else had taken at least 3, maybe 4. So. Yeah,
I think it was last game I took 3 or 4 loans and didn't really build a lot of income buildings, I don't think. And and win, but it was kind of close.
Yeah. One other thing I think is kind of interesting to talk about is the selling action, which is where you get to flip over your buildings by essentially selling the goods on them to the markets. And part of that is that you have to make sure that buildings that you're selling are connected to specific marketplaces on the boards through canals or rails. But what makes that kind of interesting is that sometimes to sell you need to take beer, as well as when you sell, you can sell everything that you can with one action. So a big part of the game is trying to set it up so you can sell multiple things at the same time, but also you kind of, at least the way I find I play is that, setting it up so you can do your first action in order to facilitate the sell to make it safe without waiting for somebody else to maybe steal the beer that you needed in order to perform that sell.
Yeah, if you're just trying to set up a big like five points or five good sale, someone else is gonna snipe that and kind of ruin your plans.
Yeah, so the longer you wait and the more you try to set that up, the bigger the chance that somebody is going to ruin that for you, and maybe your 4 sell will become a 2 sell.
Right.
So that definitely is an interesting thing. You really have to pay attention to what other people are planning to do to make sure it doesn't interfere with your sells.
Yeah, I like that aspect a lot as well. It's fun trying to set one up and make sure that no one can snipe it out from under you.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of times that does result in the turn that you're going to do the sell ends up build a brewery so you can get some beer out to facilitate the sales.
Yeah, or even like doing the money thing where you might take a cheap turn knowing that you'll go first in the next round and be able to set up that sell.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going last and then first, you can essentially have 4 actions in a row.
One other kind of unique thing that I guess we kind of forgot to talk about earlier on is the 2 eras. So you do the canal era first and then the rail era. But after the canal era, all the canals go away, so nothing's connected to anything anymore, and all buildings that are level 1 also go away. So a lot of what you may have done in the first half of the game, I guess, can be wiped out. You have any strong thoughts about that one way or the other?
It's definitely an interesting mechanic. I understand the canal part of it. The building thing always trips me up a little bit. Especially, it can become an interesting choice if you want to push for a level 2 building, just to have it stay on the board. But part of that is also if you lose all your buildings in the canal era, that gives you the freedom to start anywhere you want and during the rail era. Whereas if you have a building, then you kind of are stuck more into that area, which could be a negative if your hand doesn't really line up with that. But it's definitely interesting. It clears out a lot of the board, and the first round is more just kind of to set up your income and really get going for the second round.
Yeah, I
should say.
I think it's interesting. I don't necessarily love it, but I don't have any real negative thoughts about it either. But I think it is a unique thing. Can't think of a lot of games that do a similar thing that's basically a full reset between halves.
Yeah, it's kind of that full reset with a
full reset of the board.
Like a mid round or a mid era scoring, I guess, where you can get some points. Usually not as much as you get in the rail, but it definitely could matter a pretty good amount.
Yeah, it's enough points that it can be the difference between winning or losing at the end. Like a lot of our games are within 10 or so points, I think, and you can definitely get more than that in the canal era.
Yep. So, anything else you want to talk about, or you want to move the scores here?
I think I'm ready for scores.
All right. So, what were you thinking?
I like this game a lot. It's a lot of interaction. I care what everyone is doing the whole time. Even if I'm trying to be off by myself, I can't necessarily do that. Someone can easily connect into my stuff and take the things I want, mess up my plans. And it also goes relatively quickly, or feels like it goes relatively quickly.
Yeah.
It's not a short game. It takes us like 3 hours, I think, on average. So I'm not saying it's short, but it doesn't feel very long to me. So I like it a lot, and I think I'll give it a 8.5.
Yeah, actually, I'm right with you. I was going to say an 8.5. I think this is one of the games that we've played the most with our gaming group. it seems like everybody's willing to bring it to the table. It almost feels like every rotation we get it back in there, so it's definitely pretty fun. I don't think there's much else that I've played that quite does what it does, so it's definitely a unique feeling. And yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's solid. I care about what other people are doing. I'm trying to weigh the risks of, stepping out of other people's feet. And it's very tight and yeah, a lot of fun.
All right, that was Brass Birmingham. Check it out. We both like it a lot. And if you want to look at the new one, the crowdfunding for Pittsburgh is going on. It's expensive though, so people are upset about that. Bye.
See ya.